A stone block weighing over 100 tons fits another with a precision measured in millimeters. This is not a modern factory, but the ancient ruins of Puma Punku, a site in Bolivia that defies every conventional explanation for how it was built. By the end of this exploration, you will see ancient history through an entirely new lens, confronting evidence that challenges the very timeline of human achievement. We will investigate stones cut with machine-like accuracy and ask who or what possessed the knowledge to assemble them. What does a puzzle this profound reveal about the forgotten capabilities of our ancestors? The air here is thin and cold, a constant reminder you are standing on the roof of the world. Puma Punku rests on the Bolivian Altiplano, a vast treeless plain nearly 13,000 feet above the sea, where the sky feels immense and the wind carries a timeless chill. Just to the west lies the deep blue expanse of Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake on the planet. This is not a gentle place for monumental construction. It is a landscape of the very environment presents a formidable challenge to survival, let alone to the creation of architectural marvels. Yet here, the Tiwanaku culture chose to build not just a settlement, but a profound spiritual and political center. For centuries, beginning long before the rise of the Inca Empire, this city thrived. It was a hub of ceremony, trade, and power, its influence radiating across the Andes. The name Tiwanaku itself speaks to a place of deep significance, a focal point where the earthly and the celestial were believed to meet. Within this sacred complex, Puma Punku was designed as a distinct and awe-inspiring platform, its name often translated as the Door of the Puma. To stand there today is to feel a powerful juxtaposition. The raw, unforgiving power of the Altiplano surrounds you, a world of brown earth and relentless wind, and set against this stark backdrop are these inexplicable stones with their geometric perfection and impossible seams. This setting transforms the mystery from a simple question of how they cut the rock into a much deeper puzzle. How did a society working with what we assume were simple tools coordinate the quarrying, transportation, and flawless assembly of 100-ton blocks in this oxygen-poor, remote highland? The environment itself amplifies every accomplishment, making the precision laid before us not just impressive, but truly, bewilderingly out of place. The first thing that strikes you at Puma Punku is not the architecture, but the absolute devastation. You are not walking through a preserved ruin, but across a titanic puzzle box that has been violently shaken and scattered. The ground is a chaotic mosaic of broken stone, where monolithic blocks weighing many tons lie tumbled and fragmented as if discarded by some unimaginable force. Among the rubble, distinct forms emerge. There are the iconic H blocks, massive stones with complex geometric recesses that look like components from some colossal machine. There are sections of intricately carved red sandstone portals, now snapped and lying on their sides, and everywhere there are slabs of andesite, a stone harder than granite, cut with razor-sharp edges and perfectly flat surfaces, now strewn about like playing cards. This is not a slow decay from centuries of wind and rain. This scene speaks of a singular, catastrophic event that tore the very heart out of Puma Punku. Historical accounts from early Spanish chroniclers describe it already in this shattered state, a place the local Aymara people spoke of as having been built in a single night by ancient gods and then destroyed by a great upheaval. Modern researchers look at the sheer energy required to scatter these megaliths and grapple with the possible causes. Could a massive earthquake common in the Andes have been responsible? Or perhaps a cataclysmic flood from Lake Titicaca, surging across the plain with enough force to topple these stones? Some point to geological evidence suggesting rapid shifts in the landscape itself. The sheer scale of the destruction is the site's first and most profound enigma, because it actively obscures the answers we seek. We are not studying a completed building, but trying to deduce the blueprint from a heap of shattered pieces, each one whispering of a sophistication that makes their current disarray all the more baffling. Amidst this field of scattered giants, the true depth of the mystery only becomes clear when you kneel down and run a hand across the surface of a fallen stone. The material itself is the first clue. The builders of Puma Punku worked with two primary stones, each presenting its own formidable challenge. The first is a dense, grey igneous rock called andesite, harder than granite, formed from the slow cooling of lava deep within the earth. The second is a vibrant red sandstone, slightly softer but still incredibly durable. To shape these materials with the primitive tools we traditionally attribute to ancient Andean cultures, like hammerstones and simple copper implements, would be a task of monumental, grinding effort. Yet the evidence before us tells a story not of laborious pounding, but of startling, almost effortless precision. Look closely at any of the larger andesite slabs. Their surfaces are not merely smooth, they are perfectly flat, as if planed by a modern machine. The edges are not rounded or chipped, but are crisp, razor-sharp lines that meet at flawless 90-degree angles. This geometric perfection is not an artistic choice. It is a technical signature, a fingerprint left by a method of working stone that we struggle to replicate even today without powered tools. The most famous examples of this are the Enigmatic H Blocks. These are not simple building blocks. They are complex, precisely engineered components, each featuring a series of identical, intricate notches and channels cut into their faces. These are not decorative carvings, they are functional interfaces, designed to interlock with other stones or with metal clamps in a way that would create a structure of immense stability. The real shock comes from the measurements. The recesses on these blocks, sometimes dozens on a single stone, are not just similar, they are identical. Their depths, their widths, the spacing between them, all match with an accuracy measured in mere millimeters. This is not hand craftsmanship as we understand it from the ancient world. This is modular, industrial-scale precision. It suggests the use of templates, of a standardized measurement system applied with unwavering consistency. To achieve this on andesite, a stone that would quickly blunt copper tools, forces a difficult question. What technology, now lost to time, allowed the builders to cut, shape, and finish these stones not as one-off masterpieces, but as mass-produced components of a grand design? The stone itself is silent, but its impossible geometry shouts of a knowledge we have yet to rediscover. But the true signature of Puma Punku's builders is not found on the flat faces of the stones, it is hidden within them. If the geometric precision was a puzzle, the joinery is the lock and key. Scattered across the site are stones that do not simply stack, they interlock with a complexity that feels anachronistic. Look at the edges of some andesite slabs and you will find neat, rectangular notches, perfectly cut recesses designed to hold metal clamps. These are not crude holes. They are precise fittings with flat bottoms and sharp corners, often arranged in pairs. Researchers believe these once held eye-shaped clamps, likely made of a copper alloy, which were poured molten into the channels, fusing separate blocks into a single, unshakable unit. This technique, called metal cladding, is a form of ancient anti-seismic engineering. It allowed the entire structure to flex and sway as one during an earthquake, dissipating the energy of the tremor instead of cracking apart. The knowledge this implies is profound. It means the builders understood not just stonework, but metallurgy, and possessed a sophisticated grasp of dynamic loads and structural integrity. They were not merely stacking weight, they were engineering resilience. Even more bewildering are the dovetail cuts. On certain blocks, you can find intricate, flanged channels carved deep into the stone. These are not surface decorations, they are complex, three-dimensional sockets designed to receive a corresponding tab from another stone, locking them together with the same principle a modern carpenter uses to join wood. Creating a single, simple dovetail in hardwood by hand requires skill and sharp tools. Creating multiple, identical dovetails in andesite, a material that laughs at copper chisels, seems to defy the very physics of the possible. Each tiny, perfect fitting is a whisper of a process we cannot see. How do you carve a complex negative space inside solid rock with such flawless internal geometry? The absence of tool marks suggests a method that removed material cleanly, almost surgically. This level of miniature precision, applied to megalithic construction, points to a lost school of engineering. It forces us to wonder if we have underestimated an entire lineage of technical knowledge, one that viewed stone not as a barrier, but as a malleable component in a grand, interconnected design. The sophistication of these stone fittings leads directly to an even more daunting physical challenge. Where did these stones come from, and how on earth did they get here? To understand the full scale of the achievement at Puma Punku, we must trace the stones back to their source, a journey that presents a logistical puzzle as immense as the blocks themselves. The vibrant red sandstone was likely sourced from a quarry near Lake Titicaca, a mere 10 miles away. While this distance is manageable, moving multi-ton slabs across that landscape without wheels or large beasts of burden would still have been a monumental task. But the real enigma lies with the gray andesite, the stone of those impossibly precise H blocks and razor-edged slabs. Geologists have identified the nearest known source for this specific type of andesite. It is not a local hillside, it is a quarry on the Copacabana Peninsula, situated on the far side of Lake Titicaca. To bring a single block from that quarry to the building site at Puma Punku would have required a journey of over 50 miles. Imagine the route. First, the multi-ton block, some weighing over 100 tons, would need to be extracted from the mountain and shaped, at least roughly, at the quarry. Then it would need to be moved down to the shore of the lake. From there, it would have to be loaded onto some form of watercraft, transported across miles of open, often choppy, high-altitude water. After landing on the southern shore, the journey was not over. The block then had to be dragged across another 15 miles of rough, uneven altiplano terrain to finally reach the construction site. This is not a simple story of manpower. It is a colossal feat of coordination, engineering, and sheer will. The Tiwanaku culture had no wheels, no known system of pulleys or cranes, and no draft animals like oxen or horses available in the Americas at that time. Every ounce of force required to move these stones would have come from human muscle, guided by ingenious minds. How did they do it? Researchers propose theories involving log rollers, rope systems, and carefully prepared earthen ramps. They suggest the use of reed boats, possibly enormous ones, capable of bearing such loads on the lake. Yet, even with these plausible methods, the scale remains staggering. Transporting just one of the largest blocks would have required the coordinated effort of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of individuals, all working in unison for weeks or months. This transforms our understanding of Tiwanaku from a skilled culture into a highly organized civilization with staggering project management capabilities. It speaks of a society that could marshal and sustain a vast workforce, feed them, house them, and motivate them toward a common, seemingly impossible goal that stretched across generations. The quarries are silent, but the distance they impose shouts of a forgotten chapter in human ingenuity, where the movement of mountains was not a metaphor, but a literal, managed achievement. This eerie smoothness presents perhaps the quietest yet loudest question of all. At Puma Punku, the finished stone surfaces often show no sign of how they were made. In most ancient sites, from the pyramids of Giza to the temples of classical Greece, you can find the story of their creation written directly onto the stone. You can see the parallel grooves left by bronze chisels, the pockmarks from persistent pounding with hammerstones, the sweeping curves of abrasive sanding. These tool marks are the fingerprints of the artisans, a direct connection to their labor and their methods. But at Puma Punku, on those perfectly flat andesite plains and within those intricate geometric channels, that connection is severed. The stone is silent. The surfaces are not just smooth, they are often flawlessly so, with a consistent finish that suggests a single, controlled process from start to completion. This absence is not a lack of evidence, it is evidence of something profoundly different. It forces a confrontation with our assumptions. If they weren't pounding and grinding for years, what were they doing? One theory that emerges from local legend and some researchers is the idea of stone softening. Could the builders have possessed a lost botanical or chemical agent, a substance that temporarily made the hard andesite malleable, like clay, allowing it to be molded and shaped before it hardened again? While intriguing, no conclusive evidence for such a substance has ever been found. A more grounded, yet still advanced, possibility involves abrasives. Imagine using a slurry of water and an incredibly hard material, like crushed diamond or corundum, applied with a saw or drill. This could account for the clean, precise cuts and the lack of percussive marks. The Tiwanaku had access to obsidian, a volcanic glass sharper than surgical steel, and local streams carry abrasive sands. But to achieve the millimeter precision and flawless flatness on such a scale would require not just the right abrasive, but a stabilizing technology, a way to guide the cutting tool with machine-like steadiness. This leads to the most challenging implication of all. Perhaps the method was something we haven't yet conceived, a principle of material science or energy application that left no physical tool mark because the tool itself was not physical in the way we understand. The silence of the stone, therefore, speaks volumes not about the absence of technology, but about the presence of a technology so refined, so clean in its execution, that it has vanished from the historical record, leaving behind only its perfect, inexplicable products. Who were the minds behind these impossible stones? The answer, according to most history books, is the Tiwanaku culture. This was a remarkable pre-Columbian civilization that flourished on the Altiplano for centuries, roughly from 500 to 1000 AD. They were far more than just builders of stone. They were master agricultural engineers who created raised field systems called suka collas, which transformed the harsh, frost-prone plains into fertile, productive land. This innovation allowed them to support a large, centralized population in their capital city, which became a major religious and political hub. Their society was complex, with a stratified class system and a powerful priesthood that likely centered their beliefs on a creator god named Viracocha, a deity associated with the sun and storms. Their influence stretched far across the Andes, with their artistic styles and cultural ideas found hundreds of miles from their homeland. This is the civilization we credit with the vision of Puma Punku. But here is where the mystery takes a sharp turn. When you place the known achievements of the Tiwanaku culture next to the specific, mind-bending precision of Puma Punku's stonework, a dissonant note emerges. The Tiwanaku were undoubtedly brilliant, but their other surviving architecture, while impressive, follows a different set of rules. Their stonework at the main Tiwanaku site, including the famous Sun Gate and the Akapana Pyramid, showcases skilled craftsmanship with large, often irregularly shaped stones fitted together with care. Yet it does not display the same industrial, machined precision, the flawless modularity, or the advanced metal cladding seen at Puma Punku. This stark contrast has led a number of researchers, archaeologists, and engineers to ask a provocative question. Did the Tiwanaku culture actually build Puma Punku from the ground up, or did they inherit it? Could they have discovered an already ancient, pre-existing complex of shattered megaliths and incorporated it into their own sacred landscape? building around and upon a mystery they themselves could not fully explain. Proponents of this view point to geological assessments of the stone's wear, suggesting water erosion patterns that might indicate a far greater age, potentially dating back thousands of years before the Tiwanaku era. They argue that the architectural style of Puma Punku is an outlier, a technological leap that seems disconnected from the gradual evolution seen elsewhere. This is not a question of diminishing the Tiwanaku's accomplishments, but of trying to reconcile two seemingly incompatible realities. It sets the stage for a profound debate that goes to the very heart of how we understand history. On one side stands conventional archaeology, which places the site within the known timeline of a brilliant Andean civilization. On the other, alternative timelines whisper of a forgotten epoch, where another, perhaps even more advanced, culture left its signature on these stones, a signature the Tiwanaku later found and revered. The true identity of the builders remains locked within the stone, and the answer depends entirely on which key we choose to use. For every mystery, there is an established path of understanding, a framework built by decades of careful scholarship. When we step into the halls of mainstream archaeology, the narrative surrounding Puma Punku shifts from the realm of the impossible to the extraordinary, yet wholly human. Here, the prevailing view is one of profound respect for the Tiwanaku civilization's ingenuity. Experts in this field do not see a technological anomaly, but rather the pinnacle of a long-developed tradition of stoneworking. They point to the tools found at the site and throughout the Tiwanaku world. Stone hammers made of harder rock than the andesite they were shaping have been discovered in abundance. Simple copper chisels and bronze alloys, while softer than the stone, could be effective when used with a clever technique. The secret, archaeologists explain, was not in the hardness of the tool, but in the persistence of the artisan and the clever use of abrasives. By adding a slurry of water and quartz sand, a material readily available from local streams, to a copper saw or drill, the Tiwanaku crafters effectively created a primitive but highly effective cutting system. The sand, harder than the copper, did the actual grinding, allowing them to slowly, methodically, incise even the toughest andesite. The process would have been agonizingly slow, a testament not to lost technology, but to monumental patience and generational dedication. The famous precision, the identical H block recesses, is explained through the use of templates. A master artisan would create a perfect model, perhaps from wood or a softer stone, and that template would be used to trace the design onto each new block. From there, it was a matter of skilled hands following the lines, correcting over years of apprenticeship, with the accumulated knowledge of a guild passed from father to son, from master to apprentice. The flawless flat surfaces, they could be achieved through a process of pecking and grinding, using harder stones and abrasive sands to slowly wear down high spots until a perfect plane was achieved, checked perhaps with simple water levels or taut strings. From this perspective, Puma Punku is not a problem to be solved with speculative science, but a masterpiece to be appreciated for what it represents, the absolute zenith of pre-industrial human skill. Archaeologists remind us that our modern mindset, conditioned by power tools and instant results, often underestimates what can be accomplished with time, tradition, and relentless human effort. What looks like machine-made precision to our eyes was, for them, simply the standard of their craft, the result of a culture that invested centuries into perfecting a single, sacred art. This view grounds the wonder of Puma Punku firmly in the story of humanity, a story where the greatest mysteries are often just the forgotten depths of our own ancestors' capabilities. Yet the quiet testimony of the stone speaks a different language to those who work with materials for a living. When modern engineers, machinists, and stonemasons visit Puma Punku, they often leave not with a sense of historical admiration, but with professional disbelief. Their analysis pushes the mystery into a new and highly debated territory, one centered on a single technical concept: tolerance. In manufacturing, tolerance is the permissible limit of variation in a physical dimension. It is the difference between a part that fits and one that does not, between something handmade and something machined. What these experts point out is that the stonework at Puma Punku displays tolerances that are shockingly, unnervingly tight. The geometric consistency across multiple H blocks, the fact that those complex notches are not just similar but functionally identical, suggests something far beyond skilled artisans following a template. It implies a system of standardized measurement and quality control. Think of it not as a team of sculptors creating individual works of art, but as a factory floor producing interchangeable components. Each stone was not a unique piece, it was a part designed to fit with any other corresponding part in the assembly. This level of modularity requires a shared blueprint and a method of execution that eliminates human error almost entirely. How do you ensure that a dovetail channel cut into a block of andesite on one side of the site will perfectly match the tab on a block shaped weeks later on the other side? In a pre-industrial setting without precise measuring instruments, this borders on the miraculous. Machinists who have examined high-resolution photographs and measurements note the sharp, internal corners of these cuts. When you cut stone with a chisel and hammer, you get rounded, fractured interiors. But many of the recesses at Puma Punku have crisp, 90-degree internal angles, the kind typically produced by a modern end mill or a diamond-tipped saw moving in a straight, guided path. The flat surfaces, when analyzed, show a consistency of plane that would be difficult to achieve even with today's powered grinding equipment over such a large area. This has led some to propose the use of guided, repetitive motion tools. Imagine a primitive but effective saw, perhaps a copper blade embedded with abrasives, mounted on a stable, linear track. Or a drilling apparatus that could be turned with a bow, creating a consistent bore. These are not outlandish ideas, but they do paint a picture of a technological paradigm we rarely associate with antiquity, one focused on precision engineering and repeatable processes rather than purely artistic craftsmanship. This viewpoint does not require tales of visitors from other worlds. Instead, it suggests a forgotten chapter in human innovation, a school of technical knowledge that achieved a mechanical precision we thought was invented millennia later. It presents a haunting possibility that technological progress is not a straight, inevitable line upward, but a fragile thread that can be severed, leaving only enigmatic stones to whisper of what was once known. The argument for precision engineering leads us down a fascinating and controversial path, one that asks if the builders of Puma Punku possessed knowledge that has since vanished from the world. If the stones show evidence of a process beyond simple pounding and grinding, what could that process have been? This question has given rise to a spectrum of theories under the broad banner of lost ancient technology, ideas that attempt to explain the inexplicable by looking beyond our standard historical toolkit. One persistent idea involves the power of sound. Could specific sonic vibrations or harmonic frequencies have been used to temporarily alter the state of the stone, making it malleable like putty? Proponents of this theory point to legends from various cultures that speak of stones being moved or shaped by the sound of trumpets or chants. They suggest that if the right resonant frequency was found, it might have allowed the andesite to be molded with relative ease, explaining the lack of tool marks and the seamless joins. While modern science uses ultrasonic tools for cutting and cleaning, the concept of using sound on such a massive architectural scale remains in the realm of speculation, with no physical evidence yet found at the site to support it. Another theory looks to the rich biodiversity of the Andes. Is it possible the builders discovered a chemical agent, perhaps a sap or a compound derived from local plants, that could temporarily soften the surface of the stone? This idea of a liquid stone solvent is compelling, as it would elegantly explain how complex molds could be filled or surfaces smoothed. Researchers have indeed documented certain plants in the region with acidic properties, but nothing potent enough to affect dense igneous rock like andesite in a practical, controllable way. The search for such a formula continues, but like the sonic theory, it currently resides more in the landscape of intriguing possibility than proven fact. Perhaps the most discussed theory in recent decades is the idea of geopolymer chemistry. This suggests that the stones of Puma Punku were not quarried and cut at all, but cast in place like an ancient form of concrete. According to this view, the builders would have crushed local rock into a powder, mixed it with a natural alkaline binder, and poured the slurry into wooden or stone molds. Once hardened, the result would be a reconstituted stone block with sharp edges and a uniform composition. This could account for the modular precision and the apparent lack of quarry marks. Some researchers point to microscopic analysis of stones from other ancient sites, claiming to find evidence of air bubbles and chemical reactions consistent with casting. However, when applied to Puma Punku, this theory faces significant hurdles. The andesite blocks show clear crystalline structures that align with natural geological formation, not a poured material. Furthermore, the sheer volume of material needed and the logistics of creating a controlled chemical process at an altitude of 13,000 feet present enormous practical challenges. Mainstream archaeology and material science often dismiss these theories, and for understandable reasons. The scientific method requires testable hypotheses and reproducible evidence. To date, no peer-reviewed study has conclusively demonstrated that any of these advanced methods were used at Puma Punku. The absence of direct evidence, such as residue from chemical agents or tools for generating specific frequencies, leads most academics to favor the simpler explanation, that of incredible skill with known, primitive technologies amplified by immense time and effort. They argue that introducing unknown science creates more questions than it answers. Yet, the persistence of these alternative ideas speaks to a deeper human impulse. They emerge from the palpable gap between what we see at Puma Punku and what we believe was possible. These theories are not necessarily about aliens or magic, but about grappling with a profound historical possibility that human technological development may not be a linear, constantly upward climb. What if it is cyclical? What if cultures can reach astonishing heights of understanding, only to have that knowledge wiped away by catastrophe, forgotten over millennia, or simply not passed down? Puma Punku, in all its shattered glory, stands as a powerful symbol for that unsettling question. It challenges the comforting narrative of steady progress and forces us to wonder if the stones are not just ruins but remnants, silent witnesses to a chapter in our story that we have yet to fully read. The silent geometry of the stones may point not just to the earth but to the sky. Beyond the questions of how Puma Punku was built lies the equally profound question of why, and for many researchers, the answer is written in the stars. The astronomical alignment hypothesis proposes that this seemingly chaotic scatter of megaliths is not random at all, but a carefully orchestrated map of the heavens, a stone calendar designed to track the cycles of time itself. This idea connects the site's physical precision to the intellectual and spiritual universe of its creators, transforming it from a mere building into a bridge between the human and the cosmic. Across the ancient world, from Stonehenge to the pyramids, we find cultures that invested enormous effort in aligning their sacred architecture with celestial events. The sun, the moon, and the bright stars were not just lights in the sky, they were gods, timekeepers, and essential guides for survival. Their movements dictated the agricultural seasons, the timing of ceremonies, and the very order of the cosmos. If Puma Punku was a center of such profound knowledge, it stands to reason its layout would reflect this celestial obsession. Surveys and maps of the site, when overlaid with astronomical data, reveal intriguing correlations. Some researchers have noted that the primary axes of the main platform align with the cardinal directions east, west, north, and south, with a precision that would have required sophisticated surveying. More specifically, alignments have been proposed with the rising and setting points of the sun on the solstices, the longest and shortest days of the year. Imagine standing at a specific point within the complex on the morning of the June solstice. As the sun crests the distant peaks of the Andes, its first rays might have shot through a precisely positioned gateway or illuminated a particular carved symbol, marking the turn of the year with a dramatic beam of light. Other theories suggest alignments with key stars or constellations important to Andean cosmology, such as the Pleiades, whose heliacal rising, its first appearance before dawn, signaled the beginning of the planting season for many Andean cultures. This transforms Puma Punku from a static ruin into a dynamic instrument. Its walls and portals become fixed sightlines, its open plazas become observation decks. It would have functioned as a giant observatory, allowing priest astronomers to predict celestial events with accuracy, thereby maintaining their authority and ensuring the community's harmony with the natural world. This celestial function ties directly to the site's ceremonial and practical life. Understanding the heavens was not abstract science, it was vital for survival. Accurate calendars dictated when to plant potatoes and quinoa to avoid frost, when to celebrate harvests, and when to conduct rituals to appease the mountain gods or the sun deity. If Puma Punku's alignments provided this knowledge, then the site was the beating heart of the civilization's intelligence, the place where cosmic order was decoded and translated into societal law. The incredible effort required to build it, to shape those stones with such exacting standards, makes profound sense if the structure itself was seen as a conduit for divine timing. Its precision was not just architectural vanity, it was a religious necessity. The walls had to be straight, the angles true, because the messages they received from the sky had to be clear and unambiguous. A misaligned gate would give a false signal, potentially leading to a failed harvest or an ill-timed ceremony, a cosmic misstep with real-world consequences. So the astronomical hypothesis offers a compelling answer to the why. It suggests the builders were not just engineers, but philosopher-astronomers who encoded their understanding of universal cycles into the very fabric of their most sacred space. The stones, therefore, are more than a building, they are a frozen language, a permanent record of a civilization's dialogue with the cosmos. Yet, even this elegant theory must contend with the site's catastrophic destruction. If the alignments were so precise, can we still discern the original intentions from the jumbled wreckage we see today? Or are we connecting dots in a puzzle that has lost its guiding picture? The debate over how Puma Punku was built is matched only by the mystery of why it was built. To walk among the stones is to wander through a field of competing possibilities, each theory attempting to define the very soul of this place. Was it a temple, a palace, a workshop, or something far more difficult to categorize? The answer we choose fundamentally shapes how we see the hands that shaped the stone. The most widely accepted view among archaeologists is that Puma Punku was a grand ceremonial and administrative center, a temple complex of the highest order. Its location within the greater Tiwanaku city, its raised platforms that would have elevated priests above the gathered populace, and the discovery of finely crafted ritual objects all support this. It was likely a place where the elite, both political and spiritual, mediated between the community and the gods, performing ceremonies tied to the agricultural calendar and celestial events we just explored. The immense effort invested in its construction speaks to its central role in society, a physical anchor for the civilization's identity and its connection to the divine. Some researchers propose a more specific function, suggesting the precise stone fittings and modular design point to it being a specialized workshop. Here, master artisans could have crafted the intricate metalwork, textiles, and ritual paraphernalia that were central to Tiwanaku power and trade. The site's layout, with its potential for controlled spaces and the flow of materials, could support this idea of a sacred factory. Yet the sheer, overwhelming monumentality of the stonework feels like more than just a backdrop for craft. It feels like the craft itself was the offering. This leads to more speculative interpretations, ideas that step outside conventional archaeology to grapple with the site's otherworldly aura. Some look at the vast, flat expanses and geometric precision and wonder if it served a purpose we no longer recognize. Could the arrangement of stones and metals have been designed to interact with natural energies, perhaps telluric currents from the Earth or even atmospheric forces, acting as a kind of generator or amplifier? Others, inspired by the literal translation of its name as the door of the Puma, propose it was a symbolic portal, a metaphysical gateway intended for spiritual journeying rather than physical travel. The most famous fringe theory, often sensationalized, suggests the precise, flat surfaces were literally landing platforms for vehicles from other worlds. While this captures the imagination, it is important to note that this idea is not supported by any archaeological evidence and is dismissed by scholars. It persists, however, because it is a dramatic metaphor for the profound disconnect we feel. The site looks like it was made for a function so advanced, so specific, that our modern minds, lacking the cultural context, can only describe it in terms of our own advanced technology. To weigh these theories, we must look at what was actually left behind. The artifact record is crucial. Excavations have uncovered fragments of exquisite pottery, ornaments made of precious metals, and ritualistic snuff trays for hallucinogenic substances, all pointing to high-status ceremonial use. Comparative architecture is another guide. Looking at other Tiwanaku structures and at later Inca sites, we see a clear tradition of combining precise stonework with sacred function, of building places that are both fortress and temple, warehouse and shrine. Puma Punku fits within this Andean tradition, yet it also stands apart, pushing every principle to an extreme. This is the core of the purpose debate. Form follows function, as the outline says. So what does the unprecedented form of Puma Punku tell us about its function? It tells us it was vitally, critically important. The investment of labor, the generations of knowledge, the obsession with precision and permanence, all signal that this was the beating heart of something essential. Whether that was a religion, a science, or a fusion of both that we struggle to separate, remains the silent question held within every perfect cut and every scattered stone. Standing at the edge of the Altiplano, the deep blue expanse of Lake Titicaca feels like a living presence, and it is here we find another vital clue to Puma Punku's purpose. The stones themselves whisper of a profound relationship with water, revealing a mastery of hydraulic engineering that rivals their stone-cutting skill. Scattered among the megalithic wreckage are not just blocks, but intricately carved conduits, perfectly formed drainage channels, and the remnants of what appear to be sunken pools or basins, all integrated seamlessly into the architecture. These are not afterthoughts. They are carefully planned features, cut with the same impossible precision as the H blocks, designed to control the flow of water with an engineer's foresight. Some channels are wide and shallow, perhaps for directing ceremonial libations or for creating reflective surfaces. Others are narrow, deep, and angled, clearly intended to drain rainwater or other liquids efficiently from the raised platforms, preventing erosion and pooling. This attention to hydraulics in such an arid-seeming landscape speaks volumes. It tells us the builders understood their environment intimately and designed their sacred space to interact with the element of water in a deliberate, controlled manner. One of the most compelling theories to emerge from this evidence is the idea of a ritual bathing complex. Imagine Puma Punku not as a dry, static temple, but as a dynamic, aquatic stage. Cleansing rituals were central to Andean spirituality, a symbolic purification before engaging with the divine. These stone basins and channels could have been filled with water from the lake or from a spring, creating a sacred space for ceremonial immersion. The precise engineering ensured the water remained clean, flowed in a specific direction, or even produced specific sounds as it trickled over the stone, adding an auditory layer to the spiritual experience. This transforms the site from a silent monument into a sensory sanctuary, where the interplay of stone, water, and light was choreographed for maximum spiritual impact. But there is an even grander vision proposed by some researchers. Looking at the vast, flat plains surrounding Puma Punku and the ancient shorelines of Lake Titicaca, they see the ghost of a harbor. Geological studies suggest the lake's water levels have fluctuated dramatically over millennia. What if, during Puma Punku's active period, the water came much closer or even lapped against its foundations? The site's large, open areas and precisely leveled stone surfaces could have served as docks or quays. The intricate channels might not be for drainage, but for guiding boats into mooring positions or for managing water levels within enclosed basins. This theory paints a picture of Puma Punku as a bustling port, a nexus of trade and communication where goods and ideas from across the lake were unloaded and brought into the heart of Tiwanaku. The monumental stone gateways would have framed impressive arrivals, a grand entrance for visitors approaching by reed boat from across the sacred waters. Whether as a ritual bath or a working harbor, the water connection highlights a breathtaking synthesis of form and function. It shows the Tiwanaku, or whoever built this place, were not just master stoneworkers but master civil engineers. They didn't just build on the land, they designed a dialogue between architecture and hydrology, between the solidity of stone and the fluidity of water. This blend of utility and deep spiritual symbolism is a hallmark of advanced ancient thought. Water was life, a gift from the mountain gods and a symbol of purity. By weaving it into the very fabric of their most precise construction, they were honoring the source of their survival and demonstrating a command over their world that extended from the celestial cycles above to the liquid pathways below. The silent channels cut into the andesite are dry now, but they trace the outlines of a lost element, hinting at a time when Puma Punku was not a puzzle of scattered stones, but a living, flowing center of power and ceremony. The scattered stones of Puma Punku are not alone in their mystery. To truly grasp their significance, we must step back and view them within a global gallery of ancient achievement. Across continents and centuries, our ancestors raised structures of staggering scale and precision, creating a silent conversation in stone that echoes through time. Look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, its base leveled to within a fraction of an inch across 13 acres, its sides aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal points. Like Puma Punku, it speaks of a profound understanding of geometry, astronomy, and logistics, moving blocks weighing multiple tons across great distances. Yet the style diverges. The pyramids rely on mass and gravity, with precisely cut blocks laid in courses, while Puma Punku focuses on complex joinery, modular components, and intricate surface detailing. Travel to the highlands of Peru, to the fortress of Sacsayhuaman. Here, the Inca later demonstrated a masterful technique of polygonal masonry, fitting enormous, irregularly shaped stones together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle without mortar. The seams are so tight you cannot slip a piece of paper between them. This shares Puma Punku's obsession with perfect fits, but again, the method is different. The Inca stones are organic, their edges flowing and curved, while Puma Punku's are rigidly geometric with sharp, machined lines. Then consider the platform of Baalbek in Lebanon, home to the famed trilithon, 3 limestone blocks each estimated to weigh over 800 tons. The scale is incomprehensible, dwarfing even the largest stones at Puma Punku, and presenting a similar, breathtaking logistical puzzle of quarrying and transport over miles of terrain. The stonework at Baalbek is monumental and imposing, but it does not display the same small-scale, intricate precision joinery seen in the andesite H blocks. These comparisons reveal a fascinating pattern. The similarities are found in the grand themes, the ambition, the movement of mass, and the reverence for celestial alignment. The differences are in the technical signature, the specific solutions each culture developed to solve the universal problems of stone. This leads to a pivotal question. Do these parallels suggest a shared, perhaps lost, source of knowledge that traveled across the ancient world? Or do they simply reveal the universal ingenuity of the human mind when confronted with the same fundamental challenges of engineering, religion, and power? The isolated peaks of achievement in Egypt, the Andes, and the Levant could point to independent innovation, brilliant cultures arriving at similar solutions because the laws of physics and the needs of society present only a limited set of answers. Yet, the haunting specificity of certain techniques, like the metal cladding found at Puma Punku and in later Inca work, or the precise astronomical orientations seen globally, keeps the door open to another possibility. Could there have been threads of connection, strands of technical knowledge passed along trade routes or carried by migrating peoples, adapted and refined by each culture that received them? Puma Punku, with its stark, almost clinical precision, stands as the most extreme outlier in this ancient family. It pushes the envelope of what we believe was possible with the tools we acknowledge, making it either the most brilliant independent invention of them all, or the clearest relic of a forgotten chapter in a much older and much wider story of human capability. By placing it side by side with its global cousins, we do not diminish its wonder, we deepen the context of the mystery, wondering if we are looking at one isolated masterpiece or a single surviving page from a vast, lost library of ancient engineering. But the most telling clues about Puma Punku's construction are not just in the stone, they are in the empty spaces left behind, scattered across the site. On the edges of those perfectly cut andesite blocks, you will find neat, rectangular recesses, often in matching pairs. These are the infamous clamp sockets, and they are empty. The metal that once filled them was almost certainly pried out and looted centuries ago, melted down for other uses. Yet these voids speak volumes because they held the secret to the structure's resilience. These were not mere decorations or simple dowel holes. They were engineered components designed to hold eye-shaped metal cramps, which acted like internal bones, binding separate stones into a single, unshakable mass. When an earthquake struck, the entire wall could flex as one unit, the metal absorbing and distributing the stress, preventing the stones from cracking apart. This is anti-seismic engineering of a remarkably advanced order, showing the builders understood forces like tension and shear, not just simple compression. But the real revelation comes from what was left behind. Modern analysis of these empty sockets, using sensitive tools, has detected microscopic traces of residual metal embedded in the stone. The composition of these residues is startling. It is not pure copper, which would have been too soft. It is not bronze, the classic alloy of copper and tin common in other ancient cultures. The residue points to a specific and sophisticated alloy of copper, arsenic, and nickel. This particular blend would have created a metal that was significantly stronger and more durable than plain copper, with a lower melting point, making it easier to cast. The presence of nickel is especially intriguing, as it is not a common additive in regional metallurgy. This suggests a deliberate, knowledgeable recipe, a formula developed to meet the exact demands of this architectural application. So how did they do it? The process itself is a puzzle. The channels in the stone are precise, with flat bottoms and sharp corners. To fill them, the metal would need to be poured in a molten state. This leads to a vivid scene of ancient industry. We must imagine workers heating crucibles of this special alloy in furnaces, achieving temperatures high enough to liquefy the metal. Then, with careful coordination, they would have poured the glowing, liquid metal into the prepared channels, where it would flow and settle, bonding intimately with the stone as it cooled and solidified. The precision required is breathtaking. The channels had to be absolutely clean and dry, as any moisture would turn to steam and blow the metal out. The pour had to be controlled to avoid spills and to ensure the metal filled every corner of the socket. This is not blacksmithing, it is precision casting, a technology we don't typically associate with such antiquity in the Americas. The sophistication of this metallurgy complicates the historical picture dramatically. It means the builders possessed not just stoneworking genius, but a deep, applied knowledge of material science. They weren't just using the metals they found, they were engineering new ones, tailoring their properties for a specific structural purpose. This level of chemical understanding and controlled production feels anomalous, like a single, bright thread of advanced technical knowledge woven into a tapestry we thought was woven with simpler tools. Where did this recipe come from? Was it a local innovation pushed to its limits by the needs of this sacred project? Or does it, like the stones it once held together, point to a broader, forgotten foundation of ancient technological wisdom? The empty sockets with their ghostly metallic whispers remind us that what is missing can sometimes tell the most compelling story of all. The empty metal sockets lead us to a question that is fundamental, yet maddeningly difficult to answer. When exactly was Puma Punku built? The answer depends entirely on who you ask and what evidence you trust. Mainstream archaeology has long placed the site firmly within the timeline of the Tiwanaku Civilization, dating its primary construction phase to between 500 and 1000 AD. This date is not pulled from the stones themselves, but from the context around them. The primary method used is ceramic typology. By studying the styles, materials, and manufacturing techniques of pottery shards found in the soil layers associated with the construction, archaeologists can match them to a known chronological sequence. When they find distinctive Tiwanaku pottery in the same strata as the foundational work, they logically conclude the builders were the Tiwanaku people of that era. Supporting this are radiocarbon dates from organic materials like charcoal or ancient plant remains found in those layers. A piece of wood used in a temporary construction ramp, or the remains of a meal left by a worker, can be dated with scientific precision. These carbon dates consistently point to the first millennium AD, creating a seemingly solid framework for the site's age. From this perspective, the story is clear and fits neatly into the established narrative of Andean cultural development. But a growing number of geologists, engineers, and independent researchers look at the same stones and see a timeline that doesn't add up. Their argument hinges on a different kind of evidence, one written not in pottery, but in the very skin of the megaliths themselves. They point to the erosion patterns. Some of the most heavily weathered stones at Puma Punku, particularly the red sandstone blocks, show signs of prolonged water erosion. The patterns are not consistent with the occasional rain shower of the Altiplano. They suggest something more sustained, like submersion or exposure to flowing water over a very long period. This observation leads to a provocative geological hypothesis. We know Lake Titicaca's water levels have fluctuated dramatically over millennia. What if the stones were carved and placed during a period when the lake's shores were much higher, or when the area experienced a very different climate? If the stones were already ancient, already eroded by water, when the Tiwanaku people arrived, they would have simply incorporated these pre-existing ruins into their own sacred complex. This could push the site's origins back thousands of years, potentially into a time when mainstream history tells us no complex civilization existed in the region. This is the core of the dating controversy. Dating stone directly is notoriously difficult. You can't carbon date a rock, so we date what we find with it. The critics of the conventional timeline argue that the pottery and charcoal found in the soil layers only tell us when people were actively using the site, not when the megalithic core was first erected. They suggest the Tiwanaku could have been reoccupying, repairing, or building around structures that were already profoundly ancient, leaving their pottery in the process. This debate is more than academic. It strikes at the heart of how we understand human history. Is our past a steady, linear climb, or does it contain forgotten peaks, entire chapters of achievement that were later buried by time and catastrophe? The erosion patterns on the stones are silent, but their testimony is powerful. They present a physical clue that seems to conflict with the archaeological context, creating a rift between two scientific disciplines. This uncertainty is the fuel for the ongoing mystery. It allows for the possibility that Puma Punku is not a product of the known Tiwanaku culture, but a legacy handed down to them, a puzzle from a much deeper past that they themselves could only wonder at, just as we do today. Beyond the stark geometry, a softer language is carved into the stone. Amidst the sharp angles and flat planes of Puma Punku, you can find the remnants of a symbolic world where the builders expressed their beliefs not through engineering alone, but through art. These are not the grand, dramatic statues of other ancient sites. They are subtle, often fragmented, but deeply telling. Look closely at some of the red sandstone slabs, and you might find the faint, stylized outline of a human face, its features simplified into elegant curves and lines. On other stones, there are intricate, repeating geometric patterns, interlocking steps and spirals that seem to flow across the surface. To the untrained eye, they might appear as mere decoration, but within the context of Tiwanaku cosmology, they are a profound visual vocabulary. These motifs are not unique to Puma Punku. They appear on exquisite ceramic vessels, on finely woven textiles, and on portable ritual objects found throughout the Tiwanaku sphere of influence. This consistency tells us the symbols were part of a shared religious language, a code that would have been instantly understood by anyone within that culture. The stepped patterns, for example, are believed to represent mountains or agricultural terraces, connecting the architecture to the sacred landscape and the life-giving practice of farming. The spirals could symbolize water, the flow of time, or the cyclical nature of existence. The stylized faces, often with wide, staring eyes and radiating headdresses, likely depict ancestral figures or deities, perhaps the powerful staff god known from the famous Sun Gate at the main Tiwanaku site. This iconography transforms our understanding of the space. It suggests that walking through Puma Punku was not just a physical experience, but a spiritual narrative. Each carved symbol acted as a focal point for meditation or instruction, a reminder of the myths, ancestors, and natural forces that govern the universe. The precision of the stonework, therefore, takes on a new dimension. It wasn't just about structural integrity. It was about creating a perfect, purified vessel for these sacred images. The flawless surfaces became a canvas, the sharp edges a frame, ensuring that the symbolic messages were presented with absolute clarity and permanence. This fusion of technical mastery and artistic symbolism is the key to the site's true purpose. It was a machine for the spirit as much as a marvel of engineering. The geometric cuts aligned the physical world, while the carved symbols aligned the human heart and mind with the cosmic order. They tell us that for the creators, there was no separation between the act of building and the act of worship. Every perfect seam, every carved spiral, was a prayer made solid, a dialogue with the divine etched permanently into the fabric of the earth. The silent stones only speak of the finished product, but their scale tells a story of immense human energy. To envision Puma Punku under construction is to picture a society in total mobilization, a civilization that had mastered not just stone, but the art of organizing itself. This was not a project for a few hundred villagers in their spare time. We are talking about a workforce of thousands, a vast and complex machine of human effort operating for generations. Imagine the roles required. At the foundation were the laborers, the countless individuals who hauled the ropes, moved the earth, and transported the materials. Their strength was the raw power of the project. Then came the skilled artisans, the stonemasons who understood the geometry, the carvers who executed the precise channels, the specialists who mixed the metal alloys. These were the technicians, the keepers of a revered craft. Overseeing them all were the engineers and architects, the master planners who translated a grand vision into a workable blueprint, calculating angles, alignments, and structural loads. And above them stood the political and religious authorities, the kings and priests who provided the ultimate motivation, the ideological fuel for this decades-long endeavor. How did a society on the high Andean plain support such an undertaking? The answer lies in their other great innovation, agriculture. The Tiwanaku were masters of the suka collis, those raised field systems that turned the harsh altiplano into a breadbasket. This agricultural surplus was the absolute prerequisite. It meant you could feed a massive, non-farming workforce. You could house them in temporary settlements near the site. You could provide them with tools and clothing. This level of resource allocation implies a highly centralized authority, a government with the power to collect and redistribute food, to draft labor, and to maintain order across a vast project. The motivation was likely a powerful fusion of faith and politics. For the common laborer working on Puma Punku was probably a religious duty, a form of service to the gods that ensured cosmic order and a good harvest. It was also a way to pay a tax to the state, a labor obligation known in later Andean cultures as the mita. For the elite, the construction was a statement of divine right and earthly power. Completing such an impossible temple demonstrated their special connection to the deities and solidified their control over the population. This human perspective transforms the mystery. Puma Punku ceases to be just an alien collection of perfect stones. It becomes the ultimate expression of a society's unity, ambition, and belief. Every razor-sharp edge is a testament to someone's learned skill. Every 100-ton block a monument to the coordinated pull of 1,000 hands. The real wonder may not be the forgotten technology, but the forgotten scale of human cooperation it required, a testament to what people can achieve when united by a common, sacred purpose that transcends individual lifetimes. The flawless stones of Puma Punku now lie in a state of profound ruin, a testament to a force powerful enough to scatter 100-ton blocks like toys. This devastation is not a quiet decay, but a signature of catastrophe, and the high Andean landscape itself offers several sobering possibilities. The most immediate suspect is the Earth's own restless energy. This entire region sits within a massive tectonic cradle, where the Nazca Plate grinds beneath the South American Plate, building mountains and releasing tremendous seismic force. A truly massive earthquake, one far beyond our modern experience, could have delivered the violent, shaking energy required to topple these megaliths from their foundations. The stones would have rocked on their platforms until their precise joins failed, then crashed to the ground, shattering on impact. Geological surveys of the Altiplano do reveal evidence of significant seismic activity in the deep past, making this a compelling and logical explanation. Yet another potent force rests just to the west, the deep blue waters of Lake Titicaca. Researchers have mapped ancient shorelines that show the lake's level has fluctuated dramatically over millennia, sometimes rising dozens of feet higher than today. Could a cataclysmic event have sent a wall of water surging across the plain? One theory points to a phenomenon known as a glacial lake outburst flood. During past climatic shifts, vast ice dams holding back meltwater in the surrounding mountains could have failed catastrophically, releasing a deluge that would have raced toward the lake, causing its level to rise rapidly and violently. A tsunami-like wave generated within the lake itself, perhaps by a colossal landslide from one of the surrounding peaks, could have had a similar effect. A flood of this magnitude would not merely lap at the stones, it would hit with the force of a liquid battering ram, scouring the land and tumbling the massive blocks in a chaotic slurry of water and debris. Sediment cores taken from the lakebed do show layers consistent with major flooding events, adding tangible evidence to this watery hypothesis. Perhaps the destruction was not a single apocalyptic day, but a slower, relentless unraveling. The Altiplano is a land of environmental extremes with fierce winds, freezing temperatures, and intense ultraviolet radiation. Could a prolonged drought or a rapid shift in climate have destabilized the very society that built Puma Punku? If the agricultural systems failed, the population that supported the priests and engineers would have dispersed. Without maintenance, even the greatest structures begin to succumb. Then, over subsequent centuries, a series of strong earthquakes could have finished the job, toppling the already neglected monuments. This scenario of societal collapse followed by natural decay paints a more gradual, but no less tragic, picture of abandonment. Each of these natural theories provides a powerful, earth-bound explanation for the scene we witness. They remind us that no matter how advanced a culture becomes, it exists within a natural world of immense and indifferent power. The real mystery may not be choosing one theory over another, but recognizing that all are possible. This landscape is capable of all these catastrophes. The scattered stones of Puma Punku, therefore, become more than an architectural puzzle. They transform into a geological archive, a silent record of a civilization that reached for the sky, only to be brought low by the very forces of the earth it sought to understand. This layer of potential tragedy deepens the site's resonance, framing its precision not as a display of invincibility, but as a fragile, beautiful defiance against the inevitable pressures of time and nature. Our modern view of Puma Punku is not built from stone alone, but from the words and theories of those who first tried to make sense of its wreckage. The journey begins in the 16th century with the arrival of Spanish chroniclers in the Andes. Among them was a man named Pedro Cieza de Leon, a soldier with a curious mind who traveled extensively through the fallen Inca Empire. When he encountered the ruins of Tiwanaku and its scattered satellite, Puma Punku, he was awestruck. He wrote of seeing great stones of incredible size, so finely worked that it seemed they could not have been placed by human hands. His accounts are among the earliest European records we have, and they are fascinating for what they reveal and what they conceal. Cieza de Leon was a product of his time and faith. He interpreted the ruins through a biblical lens, suggesting they must have been built before a great flood, perhaps by a race of giants mentioned in Scripture. His descriptions preserved the site for the historical record, but his interpretations also layered it with a mythology that would echo for centuries, framing it as a relic of a lost, pre-human world rather than an achievement of the indigenous cultures standing right before him. Centuries later, as scientific exploration began to replace conquest, a new wave of thinkers arrived. One of the most influential and controversial was Arthur Posnansky, an Austrian engineer and adventurer who dedicated decades of his life to studying Tiwanaku and Puma Punku in the early 20th century. Posnansky brought an engineer's eye to the stones, and what he saw convinced him of something extraordinary. He conducted extensive surveys and became obsessed with the site's astronomical alignments. Using his calculations, he proposed a radical theory. He believed the main temple at Tiwanaku was aligned to a different celestial pole, one that would have existed thousands of years earlier due to the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, a process known as precession. From this, he deduced an astonishing age for the complex, suggesting it was built around 15,000 years ago. This placed Puma Punku at the very dawn of human civilization, potentially making it the cradle of culture itself. Poznański's work was detailed and passionate, but it was also heavily criticized by mainstream archaeologists of his day. His methods were seen as flawed, his assumptions grand. Yet his legacy is immense. He was among the first to treat the site as an engineering puzzle, to measure it with precision tools, and to argue forcefully that conventional timelines were wrong. His theories, though marginalized in academic circles, poured fuel on the fire of alternative history, ensuring that questions about Puma Punku's age and builders would never go away. The stories told by Cieza de Leon and Poznański represent two powerful poles in the interpretation of Puma Punku, one mystical, one pseudo-scientific, and both deeply influential. They remind us that every explorer brings their own worldview, their own biases, and the limitations of their era's technology to the ruins they study. Cieza de Leon had no concept of radiocarbon dating or geological stratigraphy, only his eyes and his religious texts. Poznański had surveying instruments, but not the satellite imagery or material science we have today. Each man looked at the same stones and saw a reflection of his own deepest questions about human origins. This is the crucial layer to the mystery. The narrative of Puma Punku is not just about what happened there, but about our relentless, often flawed, attempt to understand it. Early accounts, whether from Spanish priests or Romantic explorers, created a foundation of wonder and speculation. Later, more systematic archaeology worked to peel those layers back, to ground the site in ceramic shards and soil samples. Yet, the older, more sensational stories had already taken root in the public imagination, creating a tension between hard evidence and enduring legend that defines the debate to this day. To walk through Puma Punku now is to walk through this accumulated history of interpretation, where every theory, from the orthodox to the outlandish, is another stone in the wall of the mystery, shaping what we think we see in those silent, geometric forms. The quest to understand Puma Punku is no longer confined to trowels and tape measures. In a profound shift, the silent stones are now being asked questions by a new generation of tools, ones that see through earth and stone to reveal the hidden anatomy of the site. This is where modern technology meets ancient mystery, not to replace the work of archaeologists, but to give them new eyes. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, is like giving the Earth an X-ray. By sending radio waves into the soil and measuring their echo, researchers can map buried walls, foundations, and even empty chambers without ever lifting a shovel. Over the plains of Puma Punku, these radar surveys have begun to sketch the ghostly outlines of what lies beneath the chaotic rubble, suggesting a far more extensive and organized subsurface layout than the surface devastation implies. Then there is LIDAR, light detection and ranging. Mounted on drones or aircraft, these laser scanners fire millions of light pulses at the ground, piercing the sparse vegetation to create a three-dimensional map of the Earth's surface with centimeter accuracy. The resulting digital model strips away the visual noise, allowing scientists to see the precise elevation of every stone, the subtle alignment of platforms, and the faint traces of ancient pathways and water channels that have been erased by time. This bird's-eye precision reveals the grand design in a way that standing among the ruins never could, showing how each scattered piece relates to the whole. Furthermore, 3D photogrammetry takes this detail to an intimate level. By taking thousands of overlapping photographs of a single stone from every angle, software stitches them together into a perfect digital replica. This allows researchers to study the intricate geometry of an H block or the microscopic wear patterns inside a clamp socket from anywhere in the world, measuring angles and volumes with a level of accuracy that physical tools could never achieve. These scans have confirmed the astonishing tolerances, providing hard data that fuels the debate between patient craftsmanship and precision engineering. What are these tools telling us? Recent findings are both clarifying and complicating the picture. Subsurface scans suggest the original complex was larger and more symmetrical than previously thought, reinforcing the idea of a master plan. Detailed erosion analysis from high-resolution models is providing new, objective data for the geological dating controversy, measuring weathering in ways the human eye cannot. Yet, every new layer of data also brings new questions. A perfectly aligned subsurface wall might point to advanced surveying, but it doesn't reveal the tools that built it. A precise 3D model of a dovetail cut shows us its perfection, but not the process that created it. This is the new frontier. The marriage of cutting-edge science with these ancient ruins represents our best hope for incremental, genuine discovery. It transforms Puma Punku from a static puzzle into a dynamic investigation, where each season of scanning might reveal a new clue hidden for millennia. The stones may remain silent, but now we are finally learning how to listen. For the Aymara people who have lived on this high plain for countless generations, the stones of Puma Punku are not a mystery to be solved, but a memory to be honored. This is not merely an archaeological site, it is a sacred landscape, a place woven into the very identity and spiritual life of a living culture. Where researchers see scattered megaliths, the Aymara see the tangible presence of their ancestors, a direct link to a time when the world was shaped by different hands and guided by different wisdom. This perspective offers a dimension to the story of Puma Punku that no laser scan or soil sample can ever capture, one that transcends the how and delves into the why with profound emotional resonance. Oral traditions passed down through families speak of a time when the stones were not ruins. They tell of a great civilization, the Honan Pacha, or the upper world, whose people possessed immense knowledge and lived in harmony with the earth and sky. In these stories, Puma Punku and the greater Tiwanaku complex were not built by human labor alone, but with the guidance of spiritual forces. The site is often described as a place of origin, a ceremonial center where rituals maintain the balance of the cosmos. For the Aymara, the precision of the stonework is not evidence of lost technology, but a testament to the sacredness of the endeavor, a physical manifestation of a community's devotion and respect for the natural order. This view transforms the purpose of the site entirely. It was not a workshop or a harbor first and foremost, but a temple, a living heart where the community connected with the Pachamama, or Earth Mother, and the mountain spirits known as Achakillas. The alignments with the sun and stars were not just a calendar, but a conversation, a way to ensure the renewal of life and the fertility of the crops upon which survival depended. This spiritual framework provides a powerful answer to the question of motivation that engineering theories sometimes lack. It explains the generational effort, the obsessive precision, as acts of collective piety. The stones were cut with such care because they were an offering, a permanent prayer set in the earth. Today, this legacy is not locked in the past. The Aymara continue to visit these sites for ceremonies, especially during important festivals like the winter solstice. They make offerings of coca leaves, alcohol, and prayers, honoring the ancestors and asking for protection and abundance. For them, the mystery of Puma Punku is not a frustrating enigma, but a source of strength and identity. The stones affirm a deep historical presence on the land, a continuity that withstands conquest, change, and the shifting theories of outsiders. This living heritage challenges us to expand our definition of understanding. Science seeks to reconstruct methods and timelines, while indigenous knowledge seeks to preserve meaning and relationship. One is not necessarily more valid than the other, but together they create a fuller, richer portrait. To listen to these traditions is to realize that the greatest loss at Puma Punku may not be the method of construction, but the rich tapestry of stories, songs, and rituals that once animated its perfect stone courts. The Aymara perspective reminds us that the true value of these places lies not only in what they tell us about how people built, but in what they reveal about what people believed, and how those beliefs shaped a world, one precisely cut stone at a time. The wind is the first thing you notice, a constant, whispering presence across the open plain. To visit Puma Punku today is to step into a space that feels both profoundly ancient and immediately, physically present. The air is thin and crisp at this altitude, each breath a conscious effort that connects you viscerally to the challenge this environment posed to its builders. You walk along a dusty path, the vast brown expanse of the Altiplano stretching to distant mountains, the deep blue of Lake Titicaca a stripe on the horizon. Then you see them, not a towering, intact temple, but that famous field of scattered stone giants, resting at odd angles as if frozen in the moment of their fall. The scale is humbling. From a distance, they look like a child's building blocks carelessly dropped. Up close, the illusion shatters. You are standing beside stones that weigh more than a bus, and the mind struggles to reconcile their massive weight with the delicate, impossible precision carved into their surfaces. The sensory experience is layered. There is the sound, that relentless wind sweeping across the plain, the only soundtrack to your contemplation. There is the feel of the stone itself. Reaching out, you can place your hand on the edge of an andesite slab. It is cold, even in the sunlight, and unnervingly smooth. Your fingers trace a channel cut into the rock, following its path to a perfect, sharp internal corner. This tactile connection is transformative. Reading about millimeter precision is one thing. Feeling the flawless geometry carved into unyielding stone is another. It creates a silent, personal dialogue with the mystery. You are not just learning about a puzzle, you are touching it. The contrast is everywhere, the raw, chaotic power of the landscape holding these artifacts of supreme control. Small, hardy plants push up between the cracks, a quiet testament to life's persistence amidst ruin. Most visitors begin their journey at the on-site museum, a modern building that houses some of the site's most intricate smaller artifacts and offers context through maps and models. Here you see the carved pottery, the metal ornaments, and reconstructions that attempt to show what the complex may have looked like before its destruction. This curated information provides a necessary framework, but it is a prelude. The real understanding, the awe, waits outside. Walking from the museum to the ruins themselves, you cross a threshold from interpretation to experience. No model can prepare you for the emotional weight of the place, the sheer, silent question posed by the stones. You see visitors from all over the world standing quietly, some taking photographs, others simply sitting on a low wall, gazing at the scene with expressions of deep thought and wonder. The shared feeling is one of perplexity edged with reverence. There are no easy answers here, only the physical evidence of a riddle. This personal, emotional connection is precisely why Puma Punku continues to draw travelers across continents. It transcends academic debate. You do not need to be an archaeologist or an engineer to feel the significance of what you are seeing. The site speaks a universal language of human ambition, skill, and loss. It prompts fundamental questions within each visitor. How could they do this? What happened here? What does it say about the story we tell ourselves of the past? Standing there, you become part of the story's continuation, a witness to a grandeur that refuses to be fully explained. You leave not with answers, but with a deepened sense of curiosity. The cold touch of the stone and the sound of the Altiplano wind etched into your memory as permanently as the cuts in the andesite. This tangible encounter ensures the mystery is not a dry historical footnote, but a living, breathing invitation to wonder, passed from the hands of ancient builders to every new visitor who makes the journey to stand in its shadow. The silent stones of Puma Punku have not remained confined to the high plains of Bolivia. They have traveled, in a sense, across the globe, finding a home in the modern imagination through books, screens, and digital forums. This leap from archaeological site to cultural icon reveals just how powerfully its mystery resonates in our collective consciousness. The site's enigmatic nature makes it a perfect subject for speculative history and adventure storytelling. You can find its distinctive H blocks and shattered megaliths featured in popular video games, where they serve as the backdrop for puzzles and quests, introducing a new generation to their peculiar geometry through interactive exploration. Television documentaries, particularly those focused on historical mysteries, return to Puma Punku again and again. Programs like Ancient Aliens have dedicated entire episodes to the site, presenting its precision as potential evidence for extraterrestrial intervention or advanced lost civilizations. These shows often employ dramatic music, compelling visuals of the stones, and interviews with proponents of alternative theories, crafting a narrative of ancient astronauts and forgotten technologies. While this approach diverges significantly from the cautious conclusions of mainstream archaeology, its impact is undeniable. It amplifies the most sensational aspects of the mystery, framing the stones not as a human achievement, but as an artifact of something otherworldly. This portrayal shapes public perception profoundly. For many viewers, their first and sometimes only exposure to Puma Punku is through this lens. The complex debates over abrasives, labor organization, and ceramic typology are replaced by a more straightforward and often more thrilling question: could this be proof of alien contact? The sheer visual evidence of the stones does much of the persuasive work, making the extraordinary claim feel visually justified. This dynamic creates a fascinating tension. On one hand, academic researchers express frustration when years of meticulous study are overshadowed by television speculations that prioritize wonder over peer-reviewed evidence. They argue that attributing the site to aliens or Atlantis can inadvertently diminish the genuine, breathtaking ingenuity of ancient human cultures. On the other hand, this very popular fascination serves a crucial purpose. It generates widespread public interest, which in turn drives tourism to Bolivia and can even influence funding for legitimate archaeological work. The books, the shows, the online forum debates, they all keep the conversation alive. They ensure that Puma Punku remains a topic of discussion in living rooms and on computer screens, far from its remote Andean location. This popular engagement demonstrates the enduring human need for mystery. In a world where so much is explained, a place like Puma Punku offers a legitimate puzzle, a blank space on the map of history that we are free to fill with our own questions and theories. The media amplifies this, providing a platform for our collective curiosity. Ultimately, whether presented as an alien landing pad or the pinnacle of Tiwanaku skill, the core allure remains the same. It is the allure of the unanswered question, the silent stone that refuses to tell its full story, inviting each new generation to look, to wonder, and to imagine the possibilities for themselves. The allure of a mystery this profound inevitably attracts a shadow of misinformation. In the swirling discussions around Puma Punku, certain claims have taken on a life of their own, often repeated as fact despite a complete absence of supporting evidence. To truly appreciate the site's genuine enigma, we must first clear away the most persistent myths, separating plausible ancient ingenuity from modern fantasy. One of the most widespread ideas is that the stones were somehow melted or softened with a secret chemical agent, poured into molds like concrete. While this offers a neat explanation for the sharp edges and modular forms, material science stands firmly against it. Laboratory analysis of the andesite blocks reveals a classic igneous crystalline structure, the signature of rock that cooled and solidified deep within the earth, not a man-made geopolymer. There are no air bubbles, no layered pore lines, no chemical residue inconsistent with natural stone. The stones were quarried, not cast. Another popular but baseless claim suggests the cuts were made by lasers or other advanced energy tools from a lost civilization. Proponents point to the clean, precise surfaces as proof. However, this ignores a crucial reality: the complete lack of any supporting archaeological context. Not a single artifact resembling a power source, a lens, or a generator has ever been found at the site or anywhere in the pre-Columbian Americas. Furthermore, such technology would have required an entire unseen industrial and scientific base, for which there is zero evidence in the historical or geological record. The myth persists because it offers a simple answer to a complex question, but it replaces one mystery with an even larger one, inventing a whole forgotten world of technology without a single tangible trace. A more subtle misconception involves the stone itself. Many hear that andesite is harder than granite and assume it is therefore impossible to work with primitive tools. This overstates the case. Andesite is indeed a tough, dense stone, but it is not impervious. It is a brittle material, meaning it fractures in a predictable way. A skilled worker using a hammerstone made of an even harder rock like quartzite can strategically knock off flakes, a technique called knapping. More importantly, the real secret likely wasn't in hitting the stone harder, but in grinding it away slowly. Using a simple copper saw or a drill with an abrasive slurry of sand and water turns the tool into a guided grinding device. The sand, often quartz, is harder than the copper and even the andesite, so with sustained, patient motion, it can incise and smooth the surface. This process would be agonizingly slow, but it is entirely possible. The real question isn't whether they could shape the stone, but how they achieved such flawless results on such a massive scale with such consistency. By debunking these extreme claims, we don't diminish the wonder of Puma Punku, we refine it. We move the conversation away from speculative science fiction and back to the astonishing reality of what is actually there. The mystery then becomes not about lasers or liquid stone, but about the breathtaking heights of skill, organization, and knowledge that ancient humans demonstrably possessed. It challenges us to expand our understanding of pre-industrial capability, to ask if our current historical models have underestimated the innovative potential of cultures that left no written manuals, only their impossible, silent work in stone. A project of this magnitude was never just about faith or artistry. It was an investment, a colossal expenditure of labor and resources that demanded a powerful return for the society that undertook it. To understand why Puma Punku was built, we must look beyond the stones themselves and into the vibrant, strategic world of the Tiwanaku state. This was not an isolated community of mystics. It was a sophisticated political and economic engine, and the construction of such a monumental complex served as a critical gear in that machine. The first pillar of Tiwanaku power was the land itself, transformed through genius. The Altiplano is a harsh environment prone to frost and poor soil. Yet, the Tiwanaku engineered a solution, the suka colors. These were vast networks of raised planting beds separated by water-filled canals. The water acted as a thermal mass, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it at night, protecting crops from freezing. This system turned marginal land into a highly productive agricultural powerhouse. It generated a massive, reliable surplus of potatoes, quinoa, and other crops. This surplus was the fundamental capital that made Puma Punku possible. It meant you could feed a non-farming population of thousands, the artisans, engineers, and laborers whose entire focus was the construction site. The state, likely controlled by a powerful elite class of priests and rulers, would have collected this surplus as a form of tax or tribute. They centralized this wealth of food and then redistributed it to fund public works, to support the army, and crucially, to fuel projects of ideological power like Puma Punku. So the very existence of the temple is a direct testament to the success of Tiwanaku's economic innovation. It was quite literally built on potatoes. But food surplus alone does not explain the location or the ambition. Tiwanaku's position was strategically brilliant. It sat near the shores of Lake Titicaca, a natural highway connecting communities across the high plains. The lake provided access to vital resources, like the fish that supplemented the diet and the totora reeds used for boats and construction. More importantly, Tiwanaku became a nexus for long-distance trade routes that stretched from the Pacific coast, bringing in shells, feathers, and fishmeal to the Amazonian lowlands, supplying coca, fruits, and hardwoods. Control of these trade flows meant wealth, exotic goods, and immense influence. This is where Puma Punku's role becomes multifaceted. On one level, it was a staggering display of power, a form of political theater meant to awe both the local population and visiting dignitaries from distant regions. Imagine a trade delegate arriving from the coast after weeks of travel. They would be brought to this impossibly precise stone complex, a place that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. The message was unambiguous: our gods are powerful, our engineers are without equal, and our state commands resources you cannot fathom. Do not think of challenging us. This architectural intimidation helped consolidate control without constant military conflict, solidifying Tiwanaku's hegemony over a wide network of allied and subservient communities. Yet the complex likely served a more active economic function as well. If, as some theories suggest, it functioned as a ceremonial harbor or a grand entryway, then it was the literal gateway for this trade. Goods arriving by reed boat across the sacred lake would be unloaded at this holy site, imbuing commerce with a spiritual significance and bringing wealth directly into the ritual heart of the state. Furthermore, Puma Punku probably functioned as a major pilgrimage center. In the Andean world, pilgrimage was not just a spiritual act, it was an economic driver. People traveling from afar to participate in ceremonies or consult with oracle priests would bring offerings and trade goods. They would need food, shelter, and ceremonial objects, all of which would stimulate local markets and create a flow of wealth directly to the temple, and by extension, the ruling elite who controlled it. The temple's wealth could then be used to commission fine textiles, metalwork, and pottery, employing more artisans and reinforcing the cycle of production and prestige. So the investment in Puma Punku was expected to yield returns on multiple levels. Tangibly, it centralized and stimulated the economy, securing trade routes and generating wealth through pilgrimage. Intangibly, it legitimized the ruling class's authority, presenting them as the chosen intermediaries of the gods. It fostered a shared identity across the Tiwanaku sphere, giving distant communities a powerful symbolic center to rally around. The stones, therefore, were not an extravagant vanity project. They were the cornerstone of a political and economic strategy, a calculated investment designed to ensure the state's prosperity, stability, and dominance for generations. The true genius of Tiwanaku may lie not in how they cut the stones, but in how brilliantly they understood that such a monument could cut the very fabric of society to their design, weaving faith, fear, and commerce into an unbreakable tapestry of power. The scattered stones of Puma Punku do more than defy explanation. They captivate our very imagination. This magnetic pull speaks to something deep within us, a fundamental human drive that transcends the specific mystery of how these stones were cut. We are, by nature, a species drawn to the unsolved, to the blank spaces on the map of history. Places like Puma Punku become powerful focal points for this innate curiosity because they challenge the comfortable, linear narrative we are often taught about our past. That story tells of steady, incremental progress from simple tools to complex machines, a clear ascent from primitive to advanced. But then we stand before a block of andesite with a 90-degree internal corner cut with machine-like precision, and that tidy timeline suddenly feels fragile, incomplete. It creates a cognitive itch, a delicious tension between what we think we know and what our eyes insist is possible. This tension is psychologically compelling. It allows us to play with possibilities, to wonder about lost civilizations, advanced knowledge, or even visitors from beyond our world. These are not merely fringe theories, they are symptoms of a deeper yearning. They represent our desire for a past that is grander, more mysterious, and perhaps more connected to cosmic forces than our standard textbooks allow. Puma Punku acts as a perfect canvas for this projection precisely because it is so shattered. The absence of a complete structure, the lack of a clear historical record from its builders, leaves vast empty spaces. And the human mind abhors a vacuum. We instinctively rush to fill those gaps with stories, with hypotheses, with our own sense of wonder. This is not a failing, it is a feature of how we learn and explore. The mystery becomes a collaborative puzzle, inviting everyone from the academic archaeologist to the curious viewer to participate in the act of questioning. This shared engagement is what keeps such places alive in our culture. The debates online, the documentaries, the travel to Bolivia, all stem from that initial spark of cognitive dissonance, the thrilling sense that history might be bigger and stranger than we assumed. Ultimately, our fascination with enigmas like Puma Punku is not really about proving one theory over another. It is about the act of questioning itself. It reaffirms our capacity for awe and ensures that the past is not a dead, settled thing, but a living conversation. Each generation looks at these same stones and brings its own questions, its own technology for investigation, and its own hopes for what might be discovered. The stones remain silent, but in their silence, they ask us the most important question of all. Are we brave enough to admit that the story of humanity might still have missing chapters, waiting to be read in the language of forgotten stone? The precision of the stones carries a weight beyond measurement, a cultural significance that demands a different kind of respect. To study a place like Puma Punku is to step into a living legacy, and that journey comes with profound ethical responsibilities for every researcher, filmmaker, and visitor who arrives. This is not merely an archaeological site, it is a sacred landscape for the Aymara people, a place woven into their spiritual identity and oral history. The first duty of any investigation, therefore, is to recognize that the stones are not just objects of curiosity, they are subjects of deep reverence. This means involving local communities from the very beginning, not as bystanders but as essential partners and guides. Their traditional knowledge offers context that no ground-penetrating radar can provide, interpreting the site not as a broken machine, but as a once vibrant center of ceremony and community. When research proceeds without this partnership, it risks becoming a form of intellectual extraction, taking data while leaving behind no meaningful benefit or respect for the people whose heritage is being examined. True stewardship listens as much as it digs, understanding that the story of Puma Punku belongs first to those who have always lived in its shadow. Alongside this respect for living culture is the critical fight against physical theft. The scattered nature of the site has made it tragically vulnerable to looters for centuries. These individuals, seeking valuable artifacts to sell on the black market, inflict irreparable damage. They dig haphazardly, destroying the delicate stratigraphic layers that archaeologists rely on to date the site and understand its sequence of construction. They remove pottery shards, metal fragments, and carved ornaments, stripping away the very clues that could answer the questions we so passionately ask. Each looted artifact is a page torn from the history book, a piece of context lost forever. This vandalism is a theft from all of humanity, robbing future generations of potential understanding. Combating it requires vigilant protection, but also addressing the economic desperation that often drives such looting. by ensuring that preservation efforts provide tangible benefits and a sense of ownership to local communities. The way the mystery is presented to the world carries its own ethical dimension. In an age of digital media, the allure of Puma Punku can easily be twisted into sensationalism. Stories of ancient astronauts or lost super civilizations generate clicks and views, but they often do so at a cost. This approach can exoticize the site, divorcing it from the genuine human achievement of the Tiwanaku culture and their ancestors. It risks reducing a profound archaeological wonder to a backdrop for speculative entertainment, overshadowing the meticulous, if less glamorous, work of scientists who piece together history fragment by fragment. Responsible storytelling finds a balance, sharing the genuine mysteries and the compelling questions without resorting to unfounded claims. It acknowledges the limits of current knowledge, presenting competing theories with transparency, while always grounding the narrative in the physical evidence that actually exists. The goal is to inspire wonder, not to sell a fantasy, ensuring the public's fascination supports education and preservation rather than exploitation. Finally, there is the ongoing challenge of balancing access with preservation. The global interest in Puma Punku is a double-edged sword. Tourism brings vital resources to the region and fosters worldwide appreciation. Yet, every footstep on the fragile altiplano soil, every hand that touches the ancient stone, contributes to gradual wear. The very act of loving a place can, over time, love it to death. Ethical management involves creating sustainable pathways, protective barriers, and visitor guidelines that minimize physical impact while maximizing educational value. It means considering whether some areas should be left untouched for future scientists with more advanced technologies. This long-term perspective is the ultimate act of respect. It acknowledges that we are temporary custodians of this mystery, not its owners. Our responsibility is to investigate with care, to share with honesty, and to protect with vigilance so that the silent stones of Puma Punku may continue to ask their formidable questions for countless generations yet to come. The path forward for Puma Punku is not a dead end, but a branching trail of scientific possibility. The greatest discoveries about this site may not lie in the stones we can see, but in what remains hidden beneath the surface. The next major frontier is extensive, high-resolution subsurface mapping. Ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies have given us glimpses, but a comprehensive centimeter-by-centimeter survey of the entire complex and its surroundings could reveal the lost blueprint. Archaeologists hope to find the foundations of workshops, the very spaces where artisans shaped the andesite. Could there be caches of tools, perhaps unique implements designed for precision work, still lying where they were dropped, or the remains of furnaces and crucibles used to create the sophisticated metal alloys for the clamps? Finding these activity areas would be like discovering the kitchen of a master chef, finally showing us the tools of the trade. Equally important is the continued refinement of dating methods. The debate over the site's age hinges on the context of the stones. Future research could employ techniques like optically stimulated luminescence, which can date the last time a mineral grain was exposed to sunlight. This could be applied to the soil layers directly beneath the foundational stones, providing a more direct date for their placement than the pottery found nearby. If the stones are far older than the ceramic evidence suggests, this method might finally detect that discrepancy, forcing a major re-evaluation of the timeline. Alongside better mapping and dating, a microscopic focus on the stone itself holds immense promise. Advanced material science can now analyze the cuts at a nearly atomic level. Using scanning electron microscopes and spectrometers, researchers can search for residual traces of the abrasive materials used in the cutting process. What specific type of sand or crushed mineral is embedded in those perfectly flat surfaces? The unique chemical signature of that abrasive could point to its exact source, perhaps a specific quarry or riverbed, telling us not just how they cut, but with what. Furthermore, analyzing the wear patterns inside a dovetail channel could reveal the direction, speed, and even the number of strokes made by the cutting tool. This data could help distinguish between a slow, manual back and forth motion and a more guided, continuous action. Experimental archaeology will play a crucial role here. By attempting to replicate the cuts using proposed methods, like copper saws with different abrasive slurries, and then comparing the microscopic marks left on the test stone to the ancient originals, scientists can move from speculation to evidence-based conclusions. The most promising path forward is inherently interdisciplinary. Solving Puma Punku requires a conversation between fields that do not always speak the same language. Archaeologists must work hand in hand with geologists to understand the quarry sources and erosion patterns more precisely. Materials scientists need to analyze metal residues and stone composition. Engineers can model the structural physics of the interlocking blocks and the forces required to move them. Even experts in traditional craftsmanship can offer insights, their hands-on knowledge of how stone behaves under different tools providing a practical perspective that lab equipment cannot. This collaborative model is the key. It moves the investigation beyond isolated theories and toward a unified, evidence-based understanding. The promise for the next decade is tangible. With non-invasive technologies improving every year, and with a growing commitment to collaborative science, we stand on the verge of potentially revolutionary insights. The silent stones have kept their secrets for centuries, but our ability to listen is growing sharper. The enduring riddle of Puma Punku may not be solved by a single dramatic find, but through the patient, collective work of many minds, each bringing a different piece to the puzzle, slowly fitting together a new vision of our shared and wonderfully mysterious past. After navigating a labyrinth of competing theories, we arrive at a necessary crossroads. It is time to step back from the extremes and weigh what we actually know against what we can only wonder. The evidence for Puma Punku presents not a single, simple truth, but a spectrum of possibility, where the most credible explanation must account for both the staggering human achievement and the lingering, unanswered questions. On one side stands the mainstream archaeological model, a framework built on decades of meticulous excavation and analysis. Its strength is its grounding in tangible evidence, the pottery shards, the radiocarbon dates, and the clear cultural context of the Tiwanaku Civilization. This view tells a powerful and coherent story of a brilliant society reaching the absolute zenith of its pre-industrial capabilities. It argues that what we perceive as impossible precision is actually a testament to generational patience, masterful skill with abrasives, and a level of social organization we in the modern, mechanized world struggle to fully appreciate. This perspective requires no lost technologies or outside intervention, only a profound respect for the heights of human ingenuity when driven by unified purpose. It is a satisfying, human-centered answer, and for many of the site's features, it is more than sufficient. Yet, standing firmly on the other side are the undeniable anomalies, the details that refuse to fit neatly into the standard toolbox. The mainstream model can explain how you might carve a complex channel over years of labor, but can it fully account for the millimeter-perfect consistency across dozens of identical channels? It can describe the use of metal clamps, but does our current understanding of Tiwanaku metallurgy completely explain the sophisticated nickel alloy found in the residues? The geometric perfection, the modularity like factory-produced parts, the eerie absence of tool marks on certain surfaces, these are not just impressive, they are stylistic outliers even within the broader Tiwanaku architectural tradition. Alternative researchers are right to highlight these dissonant notes, to insist that our model should feel the strain of such evidence. dismissing every question as an underestimation of ancient skill risks closing the door on legitimate inquiry. So where does this leave us? Perhaps the most intellectually honest and fascinating position is a synthesis, a middle path that acknowledges the strengths of both viewpoints. Imagine a scenario where the core truth of the mainstream model is correct, but our understanding of its technological ceiling is far too low. What if the Tiwanaku, or a precursor culture they absorbed, developed a suite of sophisticated, yet entirely human, techniques that have since vanished from the historical record, not because they were magical or alien, but because they were specialized knowledge lost in the cataclysm that shattered their world? Consider the possibility of advanced guide systems, like rigid wooden or stone tracks that allowed for perfectly straight, repetitive sawing motions. Envision the use of specific plant-based compounds that, while not melting stone, acted as superior lubricants or polishing agents, allowing for that flawless finish. Think of a guild of artisans so deeply trained in geometry and standardized measurement that their work achieved a level of consistency we associate with machines. This middle ground does not require physics-defying technology, but it does demand we expand our vision of pre-Columbian innovation. It suggests that the Tiwanaku may represent not just a peak in Andean civilization, but a rare, perhaps unique, flowering of a particular engineering philosophy focused on precision and modularity, a school of thought that was not passed down or was actively suppressed after their decline. This balanced view honors the mystery without abandoning reason. It allows us to say, yes, this was almost certainly the work of human hands, guided by human minds within a known historical context. But it also lets us admit that those hands and minds may have possessed a catalogue of refined techniques, a quiet technology of stone that our current archaeology has yet to fully rediscover. The stones of Puma Punku, therefore, are not an accusation of our ignorance, but an invitation to broaden it. They ask us to hold two truths at once, marveling at the profound capabilities of our ancestors while remaining humble enough to accept that their full story may still be waiting, piece by precise piece, to be understood. The questions raised at Puma Punku do not remain trapped in the thin air of the Altiplano. They travel, carried by the images of those impossible stones, into classrooms, laboratories, and living rooms around the world, subtly reshaping how we think about our shared human story. This site has become far more than an archaeological curiosity. It is a catalyst, a stone thrown into the still pond of conventional history, sending ripples across disciplines and challenging the very foundations of our historical confidence. At its core, Puma Punku confronts the linear narrative of progress we so often take for granted. Our textbooks traditionally present history as a steady, upward climb, a story of primitive beginnings slowly accumulating knowledge toward our modern, technological peak. But here is a structure that, by any standard measure, appears to be a technological peak in its own right, yet it exists in a time and place our models label as pre-industrial. This dissonance is profoundly important. It forces historians, engineers, and students alike to ask uncomfortable questions. What if progress is not a straight line, but a series of peaks and valleys? What if civilizations can achieve extraordinary, specialized heights of knowledge, only to have that understanding lost to catastrophe, social collapse, or the simple erosion of time? Puma Punku stands as a monumental piece of evidence for cyclical or forgotten advancement, suggesting that our current timeline of human capability might be incomplete, missing entire chapters of innovation. This realization has a tangible impact on modern research. The site directly inspires a new generation of engineers and archaeologists, not to search for alien tools, but to re-examine the limits of ancient materials science. Young researchers look at those andesite cuts and ask different questions. Instead of assuming it was impossible, they experiment. They build reconstructions of copper saws with abrasive slurries, They test the structural physics of interlocking stone without mortar. They analyze microscopic wear patterns with tools their predecessors never had. Puma Punku, in essence, has become a benchmark, a real-world puzzle that pushes scientific methodology to innovate, to find new ways to listen to the silent testimony of stone. It proves that the past can still present problems that stump our present, and in doing so, it actively pushes the boundaries of our understanding forward. In an age defined by technological arrogance, where we often believe our knowledge is the pinnacle of all that has ever been, Puma Punku serves as a vital, humbling corrective. It whispers that there are still mysteries that defy our smartest software and most powerful scanners. This humility is not a step backward, it is the very engine of curiosity. The site reminds us that wonder is a legitimate and powerful form of inquiry, that the gaps in our historical record are not failures but invitations. They are blank spaces on the map that urge us to keep exploring, to stay open to possibilities we haven't yet imagined. By challenging the stories we tell ourselves, Puma Punku does not diminish human achievement, it expands it. It suggests that the human mind, in different times and under different stars, was capable of solving monumental problems with a brilliance that still, quietly, commands our respect and our relentless, wondering investigation. The final lesson of Puma Punku is not etched in stone, but in the space between what we know and what we feel standing before it. This place, more than any other, teaches a quiet kind of perseverance. It is the perseverance of the human spirit itself across generations. We look at those blocks and we see a people who refused to be limited by their environment, who coordinated a vision so vast it spanned lifetimes. Their story, even fractured, is a monument to sustained effort, to the belief that a community could literally move mountains through shared purpose. That legacy of perseverance now passes to us, not in moving stone, but in moving our minds. The real work today is the work of questioning. Puma Punku stands as a masterclass in intellectual humility, a giant reminder that our assumptions about the past are just that, assumptions. It is dangerously easy to look at ancient cultures through the lens of our own technology and declare what was or was not possible. These stones shatter that arrogance. They force us to admit that the toolkit of human ingenuity might be far more diverse and inventive than our textbooks have room for. This isn't about choosing sides in a debate, it is about embracing the discomfort of not knowing. It is about holding multiple possibilities in your mind at once, allowing the evidence to challenge your preconceptions rather than forcing the evidence to fit a pre-written narrative. That act of open-minded questioning is the most valuable skill we take away from the Altiplano. It transforms history from a dry list of dates and facts into a living, breathing dialogue. We are not passive receivers of a finished story. We are participants in an ongoing conversation with those who came before. When we measure a cut, analyze an alloy, or study an alignment, we are answering a question posed centuries or millennia ago. We are adding our chapter to a story that is still being written. This dialogue connects us to a timeless human quest, the drive to understand our place in the world and the capabilities of those who shaped it. Whether your conclusion aligns with patient artisans or a lost school of engineering, the act of engaging with the puzzle changes you. It stretches your capacity for wonder and deepens your respect for the depth of our shared past. The stones of Puma Punku may never fully surrender their secrets, and perhaps that is their greatest gift. In a world that often demands quick answers and definitive endings, they offer something more rare, a permanent invitation. They remind us that some mysteries are not meant to be solved but to be pondered. The reward was never a single, satisfying answer locked in a vault. The reward is the journey of seeking itself, the expanded perspective, the humbled awe, and the renewed curiosity that sends you back into the world looking at every ancient wall, every crafted artifact with a sharper, more wondering eye. Our journey through the scattered stones of Puma Punku has brought us face to face with a profound and humbling truth. We have traced the razor-sharp lines of its impossible geometry, felt the silent weight of its displaced megaliths, and listened to the competing whispers of history, science, and legend. From the intricate metal clamps that once bound earthquake-resistant walls to the haunting alignments with distant stars, every clue has deepened the mystery rather than dispelling it. We have stood with archaeologists who see the pinnacle of human patience and skill, and we have listened to engineers who hear the echo of a forgotten technical paradigm. We have considered the wrath of earthquakes and ancient floods, and we have marveled at the sheer will of a society that could coordinate such a monumental endeavor. In the end, the stones refuse to yield a single, simple story. They stand and lie in defiant silence. This very elusiveness is the site's most powerful legacy. Puma Punku does not exist to give us answers. It exists to remind us how much we have yet to learn. It challenges the comfortable, linear narrative of human progress, insisting that the past may hold peaks of achievement that our modern perspective struggles to map. The real value of this exploration is not a solved puzzle, but an awakened curiosity. It is an invitation to look at all of ancient history with a more wondering, more open mind. Perhaps the greatest lesson is that some mysteries are not meant to be closed, but to be kept open as permanent catalysts for questioning and discovery. Let this be a starting point for your own investigation. What do these stones say to you? Do you see the hand of a brilliant, patient civilization, or the footprint of a lost chapter in our story? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest puzzles, subscribe for more journeys to the edges of the known. And always keep questioning the world around you.